Alright guys, breaking news. There's something happening now that is similar to what happened in the late 1960s as far as the government operating extrajudicially to suppress dissenting opinions, particularly those who are critical of our government and the actions of corporate billionaires and war profiteers. The media conglomerates who serve as their lapdogs have worked overtime since the Occupy movement of 2012 to deploy potent culture war distractions and keep the voting public evenly divided on almost meaningless issues, while they tighten their grip on wealth and information. Somehow, someway, they've tricked the right into worshiping the wealthy while scapegoating the vulnerable, and tricked the left into destroying itself through infighting and a system of social exile that rules through fear and cancellation. Simultaneously, social media platforms have bent to the will of the machine. With no incentive but capital, they've perfected their algorithms to radicalize the gullible, pleasing shareholders as they monetize human outrage through clicks and ad revenue. As informational literacy dwindles and unaffordability continues to rise, the distraction of poverty allows our government to do what they're doing right now, which is the mass federal detention of activists, students, union leaders, and progressives who disagree with the agenda of this current government. One is Alfredo Zeffirino, the leader of a migrant farm workers union in my home state of Washington. Another is Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia graduate student who led a pro-Palestine protest. Another is Tufts PhD student Ramesa Öztürk. Every day, the list grows and grows under the dubious notion of immigration enforcement. But the US government has been doing this for a long time, particularly in the late 60s with an FBI counterintelligence program aimed at maintaining political and social order. But back then, the FBI had tact to smear and disempower environmentalists, desegregationists, and powerful thinkers like Fred Hampton, James Baldwin, and for some reason, Ernest Hemingway. It took a decade of careful surveillance, organizational infiltration, and legal harassment to make the collapse of people's movements look natural. But nowadays, they don't need tact or finesse to carry out the agenda. Under algorithmic hypnosis, the public can easily be conned into supporting government overreach through the deployment of micro-traumatic digital media, or they can be made to not notice at all with a TikTok dance or some shit. Anyways, a total formation of a permanent oligarchy is more possible now than any other time in American history that I know of. And that's precisely because the two power structures, let's call them the two deep states, have combined. The first, most obvious deep state is connected to the Democrat Party, the cabal of anti-left centrists who control Hollywood and 3/4 of the mainstream press through a web of blackmail deliverables that are maintained by intelligence agencies. These folks are real, but they have no sway over the youth. They create horrible art and are aging into oblivion. Now, the second deep state, which ironically campaigned on the platform of banishing the first, is distinctly Trumpian, representing a separate pillar of influence, and is much more grassroots. Due to its lack of representation outside of Fox News and the mainstream, it's been able to posture itself as countercultural and launder the reputations of sweatshop owners, billionaire landlords, and business bullies through a network of podcasts and alternative media channels. Today, and more than ever, these two deep states are becoming one. As the political influence of Democrat lawmakers becomes obsolete, their former billionaire backers like Zuckerberg and Bezos are jumping ship in fear of retaliation, and are now cooperating with the very machine they once pretended to be at odds with. Very soon, absolute power will be in the hands of the few, so stay vigilant and keep it 55th Street. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Callaghan, and you're watching Fivecast, our weekly news segment here at Channel 5, the largest independent crowd-funded newsroom in the world. We actually do this broadcast twice a week, once on Tuesdays and today on Sundays. So if you want to see our Tuesday show and support the mission while doing it, subscribe to our Patreon at www.patreon.com/channel5. Subscriptions cost $5 a month with an additional $10 tier that gives you access to our private Discord server. So either way, it's not free, but neither is making the show. Anyways, I am very excited for today's broadcast. We're going to be discussing a very notable California-based cult called the Zizians, who have been implicated in several homicides over the past couple months. We're going to sit down with our first ever real-life human guest, Emmy Award-winning Detroit native and documentary filmmaker Jacob Hurwitz-Goodman, who despite having one LinkedIn connection has turned heads from Bangkok to Baghdad. So there's been a lot of talk about the Zizians lately, especially after their alleged murder spree resulted in the death of a Border Patrol agent in Vermont about a month or so ago. But Jacob has been on the story for, as the kids say, hella long, Brody. So I figured, why not bring the big guns in to break this shit all the way down? But before we get into cults, I want to share some positive news. Too often in this digital media hellscape, there's a vector of negativity, but there's still positive happenings occurring all around us every day, all the time, with almost no media exposure. So let's get into two positive stories, courtesy of goodnewsnetwork.org. Fresh out of Louisville, Kentucky this morning, a heroic bus driver has warmed the heart of a young child through a selfless act of kindness. That's right, part-time correctional officer and bus driver Mr. Larry Ferris Jr. spotted a third grader named Levi crying on the back of the bus with his knees up on the seat in front of him, bawling in shame. Levi was emotional because it was wear your pajamas to school day at Englehart Elementary School on 1st Street, and Levi forgot to wear his PJs, so Larry Ferris Jr. had to think fast. Immediately after dropping the kids off at school, he threw the bus in park and dashed across the street to Family Dollar, bolting to the pajama section and grabbed the first child-sized set of PJs he could find. Before Levi could even get to his first period class, he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Mr. Larry, who was quoted as saying, "I know you were hurting this morning, young man, but I got you these," and presented the young boy with an all-star set of fantastic jammies. Levi apparently cried of happiness almost instantly and had a great rest of his day. Mr. Larry Ferris Jr., before we proceed, I just want to tell you, thank you so much, sir. It's people like you that make the world go around. Not cult leaders or even journalists, but people like you, Larry. Moving to some positive news across the Pacific in Australia. The land of Nangs, Victoria Bidders, in Sitkans, where I once used to live. An endangered marsupial called the greater glider that was once on the verge of extinction after Australia's horrific 2019 wildfires is back and has seen a 45% increase in population just this year alone in what ecologists describe as an absolute fucking miracle. So, if you don't know, greater gliders are these cute little bastards that can glide the distance of a football field using a long skin membrane that stretches between their arms and legs, giving them the appearance of an airborne stingray. R.I.P. Steve Irwin, we love you. The greater glider diet consists of eucalyptus leaves, and they live inside of natural tree hollows. So the wildfires, as well as wide-scale logging in Australia's Blue Mountains, has caused significant habitat destruction that left only a few brave gliders in the field. But now, there's tens of thousands of these gorgeous devils back in the field. And much of that is because of the great work done by a nonprofit called Banyas Tabora, who planted trees and installed hundreds of artificial nest boxes in the greater glider hotspots. So if you work for that nonprofit, shout out to you guys. And if you're looking for someone to adopt one of those little bastards, look no further. I just hope they don't mind a wiener dog and a girlfriend that orders Uber Eats 3 times every day. All right, moving on to the thing you've all been waiting for, the Zizians. I wanted to vaccinate my audience with positivity before we get into this dark headspace. I don't want to spoil too much before Jacob breaks it all down, but the newest update we have on these crest-side clowns is that they're mostly all in jail, and Max Snyder, who's charged in stabbing a landlord to death, has pled not guilty. FYI, if you're a Zizian watching, when I called you crest-side clowns, that's a reference to the late and great Mac Drizzy, who's also from the itty-bitty city by the water, Vallejo, California, where you guys got, charged with homicide. But I'm not calling you a clown, so if you see this, please don't kill me. I support my entire family. So they're called the Zizians because their de facto leader, a vegan trans woman once known as Jack LaSoda, changed her name to Ziz while they were all living together, which is pretty typical non-binary roommate behavior. These one-syllable names like beef, sock, cup, and Ziz are sort of a social currency in post-gentrified spaces. But this group of friends was very different from most East Bay polycules. For one, they're heavily armed, and secondly, they're down to catch bodies for the cause. And that cause is called rationalism, which from my introductory research has a few basic tenets: rigorous logic, altruism, and optimized decision-making, with a particular emphasis on controlling the boundaries of artificial intelligence in a way that benefits humanity as a whole. Their community was formed in online chat rooms and forums that are still active to this day, notably Less Wrong and Slate Star Codex, where rationalists discuss things ranging from preventing aging to strategies on how to slow down the AI arms race between the US and China. There's an incredibly wide range of political diversity within the rationalist community, and I find it kind of interesting that tech moguls like Elon Musk and Sam Altman were early posters on these forums. So the Zizian faction would be considered like the alt-left rationalists. They're anarchists, which means no gods, no cops, no masters, and they reject traditional societal structures like the nuclear family and white picket fence. They believe in the violent dismantling of all state authority, which I hope begins with the LA parking enforcement and the Department of Motor Vehicles. But most importantly, they believe in total animal liberation and equate the act of harming an animal as the same, if not worse, than hurting a person. And I can kind of understand that. I'd probably rather chill with an actual murderer who acted within reason like Christopher Dorner, than a dog killer. Shout out to the pups out there. But I should note, the Zizian philosophy doesn't make any distinction between the life of a pet species like a dog or a cat and a livestock animal like a pig or a chicken. To them, it doesn't matter if the chicken is, free range and grass fed or, forced to fight to the death in the Mexican countryside with razor blades attached to their spurs for money. It's murder all the same. By the way, I just referenced our newest Not Safe for Work documentary called Mexico Cockfighting, which is also available in its uncut form on our Patreon right now. Here's a preview.
Yo no sé cómo es posible que, por ejemplo, la gente esté en contra de las peleas de gallos y quieran aprobar el aborto. Para mí, mis gallos son como mis hijos.
Todos los animales tienen emociones y sentimientos. Esas personas deberían de estar en prisión.
Estamos aquí en el ambiente gallístico. Vénganse a divertirse. Realmente es un ambiente muy popular, familiar. Vean, son aves de combate que realmente nacen para eso. Se matan realmente entre ellos.
Yo, aquí Josué para Channel 5, Canal 5 Latinoamérica.
Back to the Zizians. As I mentioned, I know a little but not a lot about them. So without further ado, here is the interview with our guest, Jacob Hurwitz-Goodman. Hope you guys enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Fivecast. We got the first ever IRL in real life guest in the building right now. Jacob, tell us what's going on, man.
The world is a crazy place, and it has a lot of really interesting rabbit holes in it. That's what's going on.
And you're in a very unique position that I've been in a couple times where you're doing a story for like 2 years, you got the scoop, you're deep in the subcultural niches of American life, and all of a sudden that story breaks the #1 headline and you got all this footage, and it's kind of bittersweet because you're like, okay, this is tight, more people are going to care about it now, but all of a sudden I'm not the guy who knows about this really, really niche thing.
Yeah, it has its ups and downs for sure, yeah. So for the past 2.5 years, me and my producers have been working on a documentary project about the AI alignment and rationalist world, which includes this smaller kind of like splinter group from them called the Zizians. And we've been tracking all these people, making relationships, shooting stuff, getting in there with them, going really deep. And, I had to get used to explaining to like my mom and, my family friends and even my own friends, just like what the hell all this stuff is. And then all of a sudden, at the beginning of this year, about a month and a half ago, there's like a bunch of very high-profile murders, and all of a sudden, everybody knows what this is. And now they're coming up to me, and they're being like, dude, have you heard of the Zizians? And it's just, it's like a whole, the script is flipped.
And how does that make you feel? Are you like more stoked or bummed, or are you somewhere in between?
It's a little stressful because it's hard to make it's hard to make a film. It's hard to be the ones to kind of like forge this territory, and then all of a sudden you're competing with a ton of other kind of like slick industry level, Hollywood production companies who are all trying to do the exact same thing that I've been working on forever, and they don't understand the deeper story. So
Wait, so as soon as the news story broke, some of the Hollywood fat cats were like, I've got an idea, and it's actually your idea.
Yeah, all the fat cats.
That's unbelievable. So you mentioned your mom. How would you explain what the Zizians are to your own mom?
To understand who the Zizians are, you have to understand who the Rationalists are. The Rationalists are a group of people based in the Bay Area, in around the San Francisco area in Northern California, and they believe that there are a bunch of AI and computer researchers who believe that artificial intelligence, once it becomes smarter than human beings, the first thing that it's going to most likely want to do is eliminate us from the face of the earth.
And does this mean everybody?
Everybody.
So rationalists believe that there's going to be a total robot takeover, not even the robot operators will remain.
Yeah, I mean, once a computer is smarter than a human, what does it need an operator for? That's their argument. It's sort of like, think of the way that we treat other species, think of the way that we treat the land, the way that we treat the planet, even the way that we've treated each other in the past. The way that humans have operated for millennia is that if you have more intelligence and you have more power, you have the right to kind of like dominate things and do whatever you want with anybody else. And so imagine this kind of like alien life form that we are creating with this super high-powered, hardware and software combo. And we're not only creating these incredibly smart computers, but we're literally putting them into weapons. We're literally putting them into, instruments of war. And what's going to happen when it becomes smarter than us? I mean, what they argue is that the natural thing is, A, either it's going to see us as a threat and get us out of the way because they don't want people around trying to like unplug their, unplug the switch or whatever.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Or it's just going to turn us into, it's going to just kind of like bulldoze us in whatever its bigger goal is. So they have this thought experiment called the paperclip maximizer, which is imagine a paperclip factory that has a super intelligent AI sort of like, and it's been given the instruction, figure out how to make the most paperclips the most efficient way possible. Well, once it becomes smart enough to do it, it's going to figure out, wait a minute, humans have stuff, we have stuff inside our bodies, we humans do, that could be made into paperclips. So like if my instruction is literally just to make the most paperclips possible, it'll turn the entire planet Earth into paperclips, basically. So you've either got this like sort of malevolent Matrix style Terminator situation where it sees us as a threat or competition and it eliminates us easily, or it's kind of a dumb smart situation where it has a goal and it's so set on that goal that it just gets rid of all humans.
Interesting. So it sounds like the psychological underpinning and philosophical underpinning of all this is like a idea that in the late stage capitalist post-industrial society, human beings are just bad. We destroy everything. We're gonna destroy the environment, and that we're heading toward mutual self-destruction. And AI is going to be the main vessel to take us there.
I don't know if the people in the rationalist world who are largely bought in on Silicon Valley and technology and kind of techno-optimism, other than for this one thing, I don't think that they would use the term late-stage capitalism. I think that they're very much, it's an extremely libertarian situation. They're very kind of like into capital, techno-capital, and kind of like, the lessening of big government, except they have this one fear. But yes, I think sort of like the subtext of it might be, like whatever we are capable of doing, we see in this technology a kind of mirror of our worst nightmares about ourselves or our worst fears about ourselves.
So the rationalists think that AI is cool, but what they want to do is create a system of checks and balances that prevents this disaster scenario.
The rationalists think that AI is going to be the saving grace of our species.
Holy shit. Okay,
if we can make it friendly.
Interesting. Okay. Now I'm definitely getting it.
Yeah. So they come out of a tradition called transhumanism or extropianism, which is this pretty radical and extreme subculture of people from the 80s and 90s who moved to the Bay Area, and they were all just like, we're ready, let's go, the singularity is coming, we want to turn into computers, we want to blast into space, we want to defeat death and freeze our bodies and come back and get our minds uploaded into the computer. Kind of like that big AI, the big internet boom of the early 90s. This was kind of like the most hardcore accelerationist wing of that. The rationalists and Eliezer Yudkowsky, who kind of he's a guy who's considered to be the godfather of the present day rationalists. He was this Orthodox Jewish kid living in Chicago who found these people, the extropians on the internet. He was all in. He was like, let's go, fucking human, robot, cyborg, spaceship, everything. It's sort of like sci-fi fantasy. Moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, joined them, and then had this dark revelation in the early 2000s where he saw in his mind's eye the AI system that was going to eat all biological life on Earth as soon as it came about. And he was like, hold on, we got to slow down. We want this. We want to defeat death. We want to become immortal cyborgs. But first we have to do the really, really hard work of aligning something that is smarter and more powerful than us with our values and our interests. So that's where the Rationalist Movement came from.
Interesting. So the idea of being an immortal cyborg, I'm assuming, is you take your consciousness, you put it on sort of the cloud, or you put it in some sort of digital storage, and then you exist perpetually through a robotic entity that's connected to that digital consciousnesses.
I don't know if they've worked out exactly what the mechanics of it are going to be, but okay. I think a lot of this is deeply informed by some of the kind of like hard text sci-fi that was being written in the mid-century through the 80s and 90s.
Like Isaac Asimov and stuff like that?
Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, a guy named Ian M. Banks is really influential in this community, yeah.
So obviously in the past 5 or 6 years, there's been a major ramp up in AI technology. Even me as like a non-tech world, just consumer, I feel like AI has bled into much more of the digital content sphere, where you see just like mindless repetition of sound bites in the digital media world, where it's like Instagram sucks now, doom scrolling and reels have taken over. So we see that, and then we also see self-serve kiosks taking the social experience out of places like Dunkin' Donuts at the Phoenix airport. So I think that in recent times, past 5 or 6 years, the average person has been more in touch with the negative side effects of AI. And has the rationalist movement existed far before that, or did they really come to fruition around the COVID 2019 era?
They existed far before it. They called it. They've existed since like 2000, 2001, something like that, way before most people had even heard the term AI, unless they had seen Steven Spielberg's great film AI from around that time. But no, the rationalists called it. I mean, they anticipated that AI was going to come and that it was going to disrupt things, just because the trend was moving in that direction. You know, by the early 2000s, computers were becoming small enough where you could start to envision things like, you know, a computer in your phone, you had laptops, you had Wi-Fi sort of starting to pop up around then. So, I mean, the trends were definitely moving in that direction. And I think one of the strange and great ironies of this community, the rationalist community, is that to a certain extent, consumer AI, the stuff you were just describing, especially the kind of generative like LLM or image generation stuff on social media, exists because of the rationalist movement. That OpenAI, who was kind of, they were like leading the frontier of this over the past 5 years or so, they came out of the rationalist milieu. This was Sam Altman and Elon Musk who were hanging out at these rationalist AI alignment, effective altruist conferences in the mid-2010s, mid-2010s into the teens. They met each other there. They were kind of like introduced into this movement. They were fully bought in on this idea that we have to align artificial intelligence with human values to save our species. And that is where OpenAI came from, was it kind of like, it rose out of that yeast, out of that world, and then Microsoft infused them with billions of dollars, and OpenAI kind of like took off in its own commercial direction. And so now you have the rationalists grappling in, say, 2016, 2017, when they first started to hear that this was happening. They're starting to grapple with the fact that they have created their own worst nightmare situation in OpenAI.
And what was Microsoft's incentive in subsidizing Sam Altman's, brainchild?
I mean, I'm not privy to what was going on inside of those conversations, but I imagine, if you are presented with a company like OpenAI that's claiming that it has a breakthrough or a potential for a breakthrough technology for a thinking computer, the first ever, aware computer, then you're going to want a big piece of that action, because you can imagine all of the kind of subsequent uses for something like that.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm glad that you made the distinction between generative creator and consumer AI and like the real AI, because there's kind of two different things that I want to really talk about here and separate these two. Because, for example, I was at the DNC and I was out there and I met this kid who was super into AI. Like, he was like, this is the future. It's going to help us beat China in some way. Not sure how, but he's like, we're going to defeat China with this stuff. And he goes, check out this dope song that I just made last night. And it was an acoustic guitar riff, and it was generated by AI about an undocumented Central American immigrant being converted into a Trump supporter by a Joe Rogan podcast. And I'm going to show you this later, and it was genuinely one of the worst songs I've ever heard in my life. What are some of the lyrics in that song?
Somewhere in America, there's a young Latino man. No job, no education, not a single long-term plan. He listens to Joe Rogan and thinks our country's gone to shit. He blames his problems on China and wants Trump to deal with it.
And so my first thoughts are like, all right, a human being couldn't even make something as tone deaf as AI. So do you see like human creativity as something that's irreplaceable, or is that just wishful thinking on my part?
Oh man, you're getting into the big, deep philosophical questions. I don't know. I think about this a lot. I mean, to be completely honest, I hear a lot of debate around this question about human creativity and whether or not computers are going to be able to replace us, and whether there's something special about human creativity. And what I see when I hear people debating that question is a bit of a distraction from what's really going on, which is artificial intelligence. The arts are one thing, and it'll work itself out in one way or another. I think artists will learn how to work with AI to do weird, interesting, crazy, horrifying, and beautiful things with artificial intelligence, no matter what. But what's really going on is that the material control and power of society is shifting further and further into fewer and fewer hands. And AI can be, and it's looking like might be, a vessel to accelerate that trend. So yeah, when you're talking about being able to eliminate entire workforces and kind of automate everything and get rid of middlemen and human decision makers and put AI in charge of kind of like bureaucracies and systems and customer service centers and whatever, that I think is what's really interesting to look at with that technology.
It's arguably causing people to take up arms. If you look at the Luigi Mangione situation, and he has allegedly assassinated Brian Thompson, United Healthcare CEO, his company, United Healthcare, had recently applied an AI software to basically deny 60% of claims that were coming in, because it was easier to deny people that way. It's easier to do psychopathic things like deny people's healthcare claims if you can have a robot do it. It takes away the awkwardness of a human being delivering that axe.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there's no human being who even has to know that decision was ever made when you have AI there.
Exactly.
And you see that even taken to its furthest extreme in literal warfare, where you have AI drone targeting systems that exist in the world.
And we're using those?
I don't know.
Oh, they exist.
They exist for sure. I don't have the research in front of me in terms of who's using it.
But it's not our enemies, right?
Yeah, I mean, probably every well-funded military at this point is working with AI to some extent or another.
Okay, so I feel like we've developed a good understanding of the rationalist movement here, at least the cliff notes. Now let's get into the Zizians, because I know they were an offshoot of the rationalist movement that had some sort of internal splintering on the subcultural fault lines of this movement. So how would you explain how Ziz and how the Zizians came to be?
Yeah, so the rationalists, one of the big things that you have to know about them is that they're not just like a philosophical movement. They exist as a social scene in the Bay Area. That there's rationalist group houses, there's rationalist parties, there's rationalist picnics, there's all kinds of ways in which people are kind of drawn into this world and basically just hang out with their friends all the time and work on very difficult philosophical and math problems the way that they see it. The way that one of the beacons that draws people in is this website online, a forum called Less Wrong that Eliezer Yudkowsky started, a couple decades ago, that is just kind of a forum for argumentation and discussion and publishing essays and just kind of like long form thought and conversation around these big problems. And it draws a lot of people in on the internet. And so you have especially a lot of young people who are drawn into this. And another thing that draws people in is that Eliezer Yudkowsky, the guy who started this movement or is kind of the godfather of it, wrote and published the most popular fan fiction in the history of the internet, supposedly, called Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. Longer than any of J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter books. I myself have dipped my toes in, but never been able.
It's like 1,000 pages, because Deathly Hallows is pretty long.
Yeah, it's insanely long. And it takes all of the kind of canon of Harry Potter and all the characters and uses them as vessels to talk about ways to improve your own rationality, ways to become smarter and to become more rational actors in the world and to get rid of bias, because that's a huge part of this community. One of the kind of like underlying principles is that we all have these biases we're not even aware of. So you use tools like this to sharpen your mind. Anyway, HPMOR, Harry Potter's and the Methods of Rationality, draws in a lot of young people on the internet. And, one of them who gets drawn into this world is a young woman in Alaska named Ziz, who is a software engineer, computer programmer, aspiring, and then sort of learns about the methods of rationality. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Learns about this sort of like wonderful utopian future that we're all going to have when we can upload our bodies into computers and never die and go off into space and populate the planets. Oh, that's wonderful. And then like so many other people in this community kind of gets one-shotted with this idea of like, but computers are going to kill us. And that's like, there's like a 99% chance that our computers are going to kill us once they get smarter than us. And you have to dedicate every waking moment of your life to saving the world from this, to figuring out how to make computers friendly, how to align them to human values, or you and everyone you know will be dead and it'll be your fault. So she, like many other people in this world, are kind of like drawn into this through this pipeline. She moves to the Bay Area with the intent of forming a startup or getting involved in the startup world and making a lot of money and giving that money directly to the AI Alignment Project and to the Rationalists and to Yudkowsky to do what they're trying to do to save the world. Has a hard time with it. Interviews at Google for a job that just, as Google is known to do, kind of like the interview draws out over months, I think over a year of just like endless interviews, no promises, but keep coming back. Eventually realizes like, look, I'm paying so much money in rent in the Bay Area and having such a hard time making the income that I want to be able to actually live this life that I'm trying to live and save humanity. What if we moved on houseboats? And so she and a couple other people she met in the rationalist social scene rent out or buy a couple houseboats in the Bay Area. They start living there. They're kind of like saving on rent and living in these incredibly cramped quarters in the Bay and staying up late at night and experimenting with psychedelic drugs and doing who knows what. And like any people in their 20s hanging out with their friends all night doing drugs, some pretty crazy ideas start coming up.
Yeah.
And Ziz and her friends start metastasizing the ideas that will sort of start to then get published online through Ziz's blog, attracting other young people. And they are ideas that are aimed in the same direction as the rationalists, to save humanity from AI. But there starts to be divergences in how we're supposed to do it and what the ethics around that look like, et cetera. Things kind of come to a head after some... Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how deep to get into this. I mean...
I would say go as deep as you want to, because I'm really fascinated as to how the splintering occurred within the rationalist community that had them even labeled as Zizians. Because as you mentioned to me previously, they didn't call themselves Zizians. Ziz is just sort of charismatic leader of the friend group. That label was definitely applied by people in the community who had a bone to pick with them. So I guess let's back all the way up. What led up to the forest incident, if you know what I'm talking about?
Right, the Camp Meeker protest,
yes.
2019. To set the scene, this is shortly after the rumor starts spreading in the rationalist community that OpenAI, the sort of like child of rationalism, has artificial intelligence. For the first time, there's a computer that can have a conversation with you. It's like a real AI that's being developed in the kind of vaults and the basements of this company.
Which we know was true because it's out now.
Absolutely true, 100% true. Not public yet, not a commercially known thing yet. There was no media around it, but the rumor is circulating and people are starting to freak out because remember, this is they spend all their time on this, trying to stop this problem. This is the greatest fear, that something like this could escape containment, could start getting developed too fast, and it will start some kind of like an arms race of AI. So tensions are really high. Paranoia starts kind of spreading throughout this world, and the Zizians, Ziz and her friends, around this time are apparently, according to Ziz, approached by someone in the rationalist world who asks them, hey, like, look, I know you've heard some things about improprieties. I know maybe you've heard some things about sexual assault within our community. Maybe you've heard some things about corruption or whatever. I need to know, are you going to be on our side around this, or are you going to, can we trust you, basically? That's a whole rabbit hole, a lot of like weird stuff going on. This is all alleged by Ziz. I don't know whether for sure these conversations took place and what they looked like. But this freaks Ziz out, and all of a sudden her and her friends are like, wait a minute, these people who are supposed to be saving the world and saving humanity are doing according to them, doing all kinds of shady shit on the side, and we need to protest. We need to let the world know about this. We need to make it known that we're not okay with this.
Interesting. So I'm noticing a couple different themes that are happening here in the Bay Area at that time. We have, for one, gentrification is running amok, obviously. The unaffordability complex of the Bay Area, which was also caused by tech, leads Ziz and co to live in these tiny-ass houseboats. I'm assuming they're not in Vallejo yet. They're probably somewhere in the East Bay. They're probably in Oakland. They're probably like objectively living in kind of downtrodden conditions. Simultaneously, there's some weird stuff going on in the tech world. There's things that are floating around about certain people, and then they feel like, fuck that. So you have internal splintering about controversy. All these things happen in the Bay Area every day.
Yeah.
So now we have those two constant forces.
And you have OpenAI, like a real AI about to bust on the scene, and everybody kind of like losing their minds about this, like high tension.
And so you already have high tension, and then whatever Ziz and them were hearing was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and they say, we're gonna show up to these guys' party/shindig, and we're going to, from what you said, they wore anonymous masks and Sith robes and surrounded the picnic, I believe it was.
It was a retreat in the woods in Northern California.
How far in the woods are we talking?
It's at a place called Camp Meeker. I haven't been there physically, so I can't tell you exactly how rural it is.
But it's rural enough to where if you saw people surrounding you in anonymous masks and Sith robes, you'd think, oh shit, this is scary. Because it's not like a public park where you'd be like, what are these guys doing?
No, there's one entrance in and out of this camp. It's a dirt road over a bridge. over a little river or creek or whatever, and they blocked it off with their car, and they got out of their car and wearing the Guy Fawkes masks and the Sith robes, and the people inside this camp who were there at that point freak out, call the sheriff's department. Meanwhile, Ziz and her friends, the Zizians, if you want to call them that, are reading out their demands, kind of speaking in unison in this kind of rehearsed way that they've clearly, it's like a performance a little bit. And they're throwing pamphlets with, all these accusations printed on them.
Are they yelling like take accountability or something?
They're yelling, halt, melt, and catch fire.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah, among other things. Yeah. So somebody at the Camp Meeker retreat calls the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department and apparently claims, first of all, that they're being surrounded by people in masks and robes, that they blocked the way out, and claims that they're armed, which is very important.
Were they armed?
They were not armed. It turns out not to be true at all.
Okay.
I think one of them maybe had some pepper spray on them or something.
Doesn't count. Armed is sword, gun, knife.
Yeah. So they were unarmed, but the sheriff's department believed that they were armed, and so now all of a sudden this sheriff's department believes that they have a mass shooting situation on their hands, and they send in a SWAT team to arrest this 4 or 5 protesters, and the arrest is, as it will be in a situation like that, under those circumstances, the arrest is apparently very brutal.
The SWAT team can only do that. You know how people get swatted all the time?
Right.
They barely even ask questions. Once the SWAT team is sent and a dispatch call is meant, they're going to just tie you up, put their knee on your back. It's bad news. So was it something kind of like that?
It was high octane SWAT team shit.
Yeah.
They came in, guns blazing. They threw them to the ground. The people doing this protest, Ziz and the rest of them, most of them are trans women, identify that way, and that adds another layer of kind of they get misgendered in their police reports, they get thrown into the wrong prison cells, they're also militant vegans.
Oh, geez.
So they're given the wrong kind of food, and they're, according to them, sexually harassed and physically assaulted during this time.
Yeah, correctional officers in rural California counties would not be the most gender understanding.
I can't speak to exactly what happened. There are still legal proceedings underway about this, but yes, according to Ziz and their friends, and I think that it is quite a viable thing to say, they were mistreated pretty terribly by these officers.
For sure.
So they're charged with child endangerment, reckless child endangerment, because there were kids, there was a whole other group at Camp Meeker at the time who was there for a whole different little retreat, doing ropes courses in the woods or whatever.
Just kid stuff.
Students, or camp, whatever. And they happened to be there at the same time as the Rationalist retreat that was going on. So they get a child endangerment charge slapped on, as well as a few other things. And the Zizians countersue, and they say, we're suing the sheriff's department, we're suing Sonoma County, and for all the things that I mentioned before. And so now you've got these sort of cross-current legal proceedings going on. COVID hits. The world shuts down. All the proceedings go on to Zoom trials and whatever, and that's around the time when me and my team start paying attention, and we're attending these Zoom trials and looking at what's happening.
Wow, so you've really been in this for 5 years now.
Yeah, so I got in it in 2022, but it was still going on at that point.
Gotcha.
These legal proceedings take fucking forever.
It was a civil court thing?
There were criminal charges and there were civil charges.
But they were countersuing in civil court.
That's right.
Right.
So things go on and on. These charges pile up, and the lawsuits go back and forth as they will for a couple of years. And then in late 2022, they disappear.
Before we proceed, a word from our sponsor. Here at the Channel 5 newsroom, we know more than most how unpredictable the world can be. On a day just like any other, you could be pulling into the office and boom, you're T-boned by a Ford F-150. Your car's totaled, your back's hurting, and you're going to be late for work. While this might sound unrealistic, it actually isn't. like at all. 2 million people in the United States are injured every year. Are you prepared for that possibility? Well, guess what? If you're injured in a car accident, your case could be worth millions. But most people never file a claim, and if they do, they're often lowballed by insurance companies into thinking it's not worth their time. How could millions not be worth your time? It's ridiculous. Traditional injury law firms might bog you down with reams of paperwork, time-consuming processes, never-ending upcoming appointments, and the cost that accompany all those things. But not Morgan & Morgan. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm with over 1,000 attorneys operating in all 50 states, even Rhode Island. They're not one of these traditional law firms who might waste your time and money. They're a national-facing brand with a promise of being for the people, para la gente. Morgan & Morgan do not settle for lowball offers. They've achieved significant verdicts in the past couple of months for victims involved in life-altering car crashes. Morgan & Morgan was able to secure one client $6.3 million, despite the client's own insurance company arguing they deserve nothing. Despite prior medical issues and minimal vehicle damage, Morgan & Morgan was able to build a compelling case and reward what was rightly deserved. In Florida, they secured $12 million, which was 34 times the highest insurance offer. And in Philadelphia, they were able to even secure $26 million, 40 times the highest insurance offer. You might be thinking, I don't have the money to hire lawyers in a case that might go on for a while. But that's the thing. Their fee is absolutely free unless you win. Fighting big insurance companies takes a big law firm, which is why America's largest injury firm can take on companies of any size. It only takes a few minutes to see if you could have a case, and it couldn't be easier to submit a claim. If you ever seriously got injured, your case could be worth millions, and you're only a few clicks away from your potentially life-changing sum of money. It's so easy. You can start your claim right now with Morgan & Morgan at www.forthepeople.com/channel5, found in the description or by scanning the QR code on this screen from your phone's camera. All right, guys, thanks. So something happened in the Zoom trials that made them want to get out of town. What was that?
We don't know what happened that made them want to get out of town, but for whatever reason, they decided amongst themselves that they were going to go underground, they were going to fake their own deaths.
All of them?
No, just 2 or 3 of them.
And some were going to be alive and corroborate the death narrative. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little, all of the stuff that happens from this point forward is a bit hazy, because the Zizians, for the most part, the people who are involved directly in these actions and these sort of like, these anarchic happenings, they don't talk about it.
How many are there?
How many are there? How many Zizians total? It's hard to say. New characters keep popping up every time there's a new news story.
In 2022, when you first hopped on board, what was the head count?
There were 4 people arrested at the Camp Meeker protest. There was possibly one other person who got away, although that's not corroborated. That group, because a lot of what Ziz was saying on the internet was circulating pretty widely, especially because of how crazy and dramatic this protest was, starts attracting more people. So you get converts and people who get sort of bought on board to this philosophy from anywhere else on the internet. So the group starts kind of growing in a kind of organic way, both physically and virtually. But maybe we should pause and talk a little bit about what the philosophy actually is that's so attractive to people.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I think that might help frame things a little bit.
You're talking about the Zizian form of rationalism.
Yes, you might call it Zizianism, although they would deny that title. They would say that it's collaborative, that they're anarchists, that it's non-hierarchical.
Anarchists, they can't agree on anything, so that's why it's like...
Right. But in any sense, there is a kind of like different framework for how to save the world that's being developed during all this time. And it goes like this. If you look at the rationalists, Yudkowsky, the AI alignment movement, this extremely well-funded movement that's, aligned with billionaires in Silicon Valley, very well-funded nonprofits, et cetera. Their philosophy is, we're going to create something that's smarter than any human has ever been on Earth, possibly orders of magnitude smarter. And this new intelligence, this kind of like alien superintelligence that we're going to create, our biggest job is to control it. Our biggest job is to force it to be friendly, to manipulate it, or bully it, or enslave it, or in some way kind of get it to be what we want it to be. Ziz says, that's crazy. You're talking about something that's orders of magnitude smarter than human beings. How are you going to control it? It's already outthought you. It has had your ideas and figured out ways around them before you even had your ideas. It's a silly concept. The only thing you can do is negotiate with it or lead by example. How do you negotiate with a superintelligence that's smarter than the entire species? How do you lead by example? Well, if this thing gets created into a world where the rules that it has learned is that if an animal or a species is less intelligent than you, then you're allowed to slaughter them and eat them and use them for resources, that's what it's going to do to us. But if we can change, and if we can stop using other animals that way, and if we can stop using other intelligences that way before it gets here, then it's going to understand different rules and different settings for when it arrives.
So this is the most terminally online shit I've ever heard in my life. So they think that we need to lead by example so that the supercomputer can do the right thing. So the reason they're vegans and the reason they live with those principles is to basically let the robot know, yo, it's all about respect and love over here.
Exactly.
Wow, that's so crazy. I mean, are they communicating on regular social media platforms? Because they can't be.
It's all over. I mean, it's on Twitter, but I think a lot of it is in private Discord servers. Yeah. A lot of it is on Tumblr. They have like very extensive Tumblr blogs.
I thought Tumblr was over. That's awesome.
Tumblr's not over, man.
Oh, shit. What is this platform called Safe Star Codex that I was reading about?
Oh, Slate Star Codex.
Slate Star Codex.
That's another of the rationalist platforms. It's more of a blog than an open platform. It's run by a guy named Scott Alexander.
Yeah, because I went on there the other day and there was a blog post called How to Create Super Babies. And it was a bunch of people arguing about what they can do to create the ultimate child with like the perfect brain. And they were just debating on like, you know, things to do during pregnancy. But it was a very mathematical conversation. It wasn't like, oh, wouldn't it be so cute if our baby was like, you know, because Tiger Woods' parents had him play golf and he became, you know, great at golf. It was like, no, we are going to eat this exact diet and consume these vitamins while the baby's in the womb. When he's born, he's not, you know, he's gonna, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a classic transhumanist conversation right now. Like, how do we use technology and existing knowledge to kind of like improve human beings to the sort of like optimal way that we can? It's the kind of backbone of the entire rationalist world.
Interesting. So going back to 2022, so they disappear, and this is after you'd already kind of been monitoring the story.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you as a journalist, you're like, oh shit, what's going on right now?
Absolutely. We were at the Zoom trial where Ziz's lawyer was like, Your Honor, my client is dead, I think, but no body has been found, and my other client also is dead, but also we can't find their body. And then an obituary pops up online saying that Ziz had fallen off of a boat and drowned. And you see comments from like her hometown in Fairbanks, Alaska, being like, I'm so sorry, like this is horrible, you know, my condolences, whatever. Several months later, all of a sudden, Ziz and company pop up in a trailer park in Vallejo, California, where they've been living in box trucks and kind of like completely living off the grid.
Yeah.
The trailer park is owned by an older man named Curtis Lind, who they had met during their boating days because he was involved in like the boating and fishing industry in some way. And they pop up and get on everybody's radar because all of a sudden this old man, Curtis Lind, has been stabbed through the chest with a samurai sword and been stabbed several times in the face and throughout his body. And he has shot 2 of the Zizians and the rest of them have disappeared.
And he was their landlord.
He was their landlord. So basically an altercation came up having to do with the fact that he wanted to evict them, the fact that COVID restrictions had stopped him. They had stopped paying rent during COVID when the state of California allowed that to be a thing. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as those restrictions lifted, this guy Curtis Lind was like, look, you weird people who are living on my property and walking around nude and talking to yourselves and living in box trucks who haven't been paying rent for the past year and a half, it's time for you to go.
Yeah.
And they were like, no. And he was like, okay. And the tensions just kind of ratcheted up to the point where he bought himself a gun. They armed themselves with knives and a katana blade, and things boiled over at a certain point. And he ends up, wandering around with this sword sticking through his body, bleeding all over the place, having shot to death one of them, a young woman named Emma Borhanian, and shot and injured another one. The police show up. Ziz is there. A couple of the other ones are there. The police question them, and for some reason they're allowed to leave, and they just walk off and disappear again. And the 2 Zizians who were shot and didn't die are then arrested and charged for the murder of the one who the landlord shot and who did die.
Under the pretense that like you guys triggered Curtis Lind by stabbing him with a samurai sword, and so even though he killed him in self-defense, you have to take the murder charge?
Apparently there is a law in California where if you start a fight that ends up in somebody dying, you're responsible for their death even if you didn't literally kill them.
That's so messed up because where I'm from, Washington, they have a mutual combat law where you and a male friend, not a friend, male enemy, I don't think you can be a female enemy, but you guys can agree to throw down. If someone dies, they just throw the case out.
Wait, it's like a dueling? It's a duel type of situation?
You can agree in writing to mutual combat in the state of Washington and Oregon, and you guys can meet up on a place that wouldn't cause like significant public trauma. You guys can't beat each other to death on the bus or anything. But if you guys met out on public land, maybe out in the boonies, you can do it.
Are you serious? This is still in the books? Do people do this?
Mutual combat law.
Did you ever see this happen?
I mean, I've seen homeless people fight with melee weapons, like juggalos downtown, and nothing. The cops didn't do anything about it.
Because of the mutual melee law?
It's not mutual melee law, but it was mutual combat. I'm not sure if the cops looked the other way because they're like, we don't want to deal with this or get near them. But it could have been a mutual combat situation where the cops like, hey, you guys you guys fighting each other, right? Like, no one's getting attacked here. They're like, nope, we're good.
Okay. Well, that's fucked up. They don't have that in California. If somebody gets stabbed with a katana blade and somebody else gets shot, all bets are off.
And so I want to learn more about the crime scene of this katana blade stabbing where Curtis Lin had the samurai sword through the chest. Did this occur on the property they were renting?
Yeah, it occurred within the bounds of this lot, this kind of like trailer park that is an outdoor space. There's wildly varying accounts about what actually happened on that day. I've heard Curtis Lin's side of the story from an interview that he gave before he was killed. Spoiler alert.
He was killed many years later.
Oh yeah, so it's important to say he survived this attack. Mm-hmm. He survived having a sword stuck all the way through his body. He lost an eye to some of the stabbings. He was wearing a patch for a while. He, was stabbed all over and somehow, miraculously, it either didn't puncture any vital organs or the doctors got to him in time or whatever. So this guy, he fucking pulled through miraculously from this thing.
Yeah.
And what he says happened was that basically they tricked him one day to come over to their trailer after he had said, I'm evicting you, and the tensions were super high. Yeah. They were like, hey, there's like a water leak. Can you come deal with this? And he was like, you know how to deal with it. Just turn the water off. And they were like, no, please. We don't know anything. We're poor innocent people. Mm-hmm. So he goes over there, and as he's bending down to look at this pipe or whatever that's supposedly leaking, he feels a thump on the back of his head, and the next thing he knows, according to him, he wakes up, and he's being stabbed as he wakes up, and he kind of manages to pull out his gun, starts aiming it at them, and then the sword comes through him, and then he starts shooting, and once Emma dies and the other person is shot, it kind of diffuses the situation. Everybody else runs off, basically.
And where was Ziz when this was happening?
I don't know.
On property?
We think maybe yes, but it's unconfirmed. It's a very confusing and muddled official account of what actually happened.
So the cops show up. Is anybody taken into custody?
Yes. The person, so like I said, Emma was killed. Yeah. There was one other person who was shot but not killed. She's taken into custody. Mm-hmm. And then there's one final person named Suri Dow who is not shot and still taken into custody. Okay. So now the cops have two Zizians in custody, and they've been in custody since this time, awaiting murder charges for their friend,
The
Emma.
First Zizians went into the slammer, as some say, in 2022, and they're still there. So how many Zizians were remaining on the outside once those two went in?
Like I said, the number fluctuates, but we think at that point there might have been 3 or 4 other people who kind of either got away from that scene or who were not there in the first place. Mm-hmm. It's all a bit obscure at this point.
One thing I wanted to ask about too that I was reading about online is that apparently at the trailer park compound, or just the trailer park they're living in Vallejo, they were practicing something called Unihemispheric Sleep, which is based upon, from what you said, the theory that there are 2 parts of the brain, and there's really 2 souls within every person. Yeah. One is a primal sort of rat bastard, just someone who smashes TVs because the sports team loses the game.
The id.
Yeah. And the other, someone who sees, a person who is, someone who harasses people who are small.
Right.
Little people.
Huh. Okay.
You ever see, I feel like
I don't know if they would describe it as the id and then someone who harasses people that are small.
When you're, I mean people who have dwarfism. When you're a child and you see someone who has dwarfism, you exclaim.
Okay, yeah.
But as you get older, you say, you know what? That's a person just like anybody else.
Right. the ego and the superego, or the id and the superego. Yeah, the kind of like layers of like the socially trained part of yourself, and the more kind of like
reactionary primal self.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, from what I can tell, unihemispheric sleep is the idea of activating one part of that brain and shutting the other off. Is that an accurate summation?
Yeah, there's a person in this cohort named Gwen Danielson who supposedly came up with this idea of unihemispheric sleep theory back when they were all in the Bay Area and they were a part of the rationalist world. And in fact, Gwen gave a talk about unihemispheric sleep at a mainstream rationalist workshop at a certain point. It was part of what they would call mental tech, which is like ways of kind of like improving or optimizing your brain.
Yeah, brain science.
Brain science.
Life
or
hacking.
Brain pseudoscience, depending on where you stand. Life hacking, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, the idea is that through some form of either hypnosis or sleep deprivation or some combination of that, or meditation, if you want to say, you are able to intentionally put to sleep one of the people that live inside your brain so that you can then become familiar with and get to know a lot about the other person without the sleeping one interrupting or whatever.
It sounds like total BS.
I don't know. I mean, I've met people who've done it and they say that it's helped them and been very effective in getting them to know themselves.
So I'm assuming you're shutting off the id and allowing the ascendant master to take over your body.
That much I don't know. And, you know, even this idea of like the id and the ego, it might be better to put it more in terms of the way that like we talk about like left brain, right brain, of like there's like the sort of fuzzy, artistic, creative, fluid side of your brain, and then there's the more math kind of like angular, hard right brain or left brain, whatever. So there's like the logical and then the sort of like emotional sides of your brain. I think that might be closer to what they believe.
Got you. And they had some sort of sleep pattern that resulted in what appears to be, according to the filings, extreme sleep deprivation that was happening on the Vallejo property.
There was probably a lot of that going on. There was probably a lot of use of LSD and possibly other psychedelics, although I don't know that for sure. There was definitely a lot of just intense interpersonal stuff happening with some very intense personalities.
Like love triangles?
That I don't know. There has not been, as far as I know, any real allegations of like weird sex stuff going on.
It doesn't have to be weird. It could just be normal sex stuff. But I'm just saying, a bunch of people walking around butt naked and taking LSD all the time. They got samurai swords. They're trying this brain sleep thing, and they hate their landlord. It's possible there also could have been some romantic entanglements.
Although you'd think if you're hanging out all the time and you're kind of like dirt poor and have to live underground and you're naked all the time and taking drugs, that actually sounds very non-sexual. Like it sounds like you'd eventually lose the sex drive in an environment like that.
Especially if you guys are combined to achieve a mutual purpose.
Yeah.
In a different world, this would have all happened in San Francisco, and someone around them would have been like, yo, like, what are you guys doing? But because it's so expensive, these guys are out in Vallejo. I also got this Mac Dre bobblehead. Not sure if you're familiar with Mac Dre. He was killed in Kansas City in 2006, but he was an artist who founded the hyphy movement, and he put Vallejo on the map. He's kind of like, when I think of Vallejo, I think of Mac Dre. I also think of the Zodiac Killer. Mm-hmm. But now I'm forever going to be thinking about the Zizians. So maybe, you know, if we can get a bobblehead made of one of those folks.
It sounds like you got a lot to think about when it comes to Vallejo, California.
Well, yeah, because it's a place where, like, you know, I always perceived it as being the center of culture because Mac Dre is like the king of Vallejo rap music during the hyphy movement. Then I actually go to the Bay Area, and it's extremely far from even the East Bay. It's like 10 minutes past Richmond. It might not even be considered the Bay by some people's standards. So when I heard about there kind of being like a hyper-intellectual Silicon Valley style cult happening in Vallejo, that was the first thing that struck me, just geographically wise. Like, you always would think that would happen in San Francisco or the Silicon Valley ecosystem, and now it's even on the furthest edges of the Bay. So
I mean, if you really want to talk about sort of like hyper intellectual, kind of like intense radical activity, it is happening in the Bay, in the rationalist and AI alignment worlds. The kind of like the big sort of like main bubble that this all came out of. The stuff happening in Vallejo, I think, was more just like these people needed a way to go underground and escape and not be known by anybody, including their family, where they were. And they knew this old man from a year or two ago, and they knew that he owns a lot with some trucks and some trailers on it. And they were like, hey, can we like chill out at your place for a few years?
I kind of feel bad for him.
It's a very sad.
I know a lot of people who are watching this have this like anti-landlord conditioning, and I'm not here to defend landlords, but not all landlords are, you know, created equal. If you own a trailer park in Vallejo, it's not like you own, a Section 8 apartment building and you're like kicking people out for noise violations. Guy's probably got like 8 trailers. He's trying to make a couple extra bucks. I wouldn't put him in the same category as like.
Yeah, he's an old guy. He's kind of into the like bohemian and art scene and like the water. Hanging out on boats in San Francisco. I think he initially at first thought these people were like young weirdos, like young cool weirdos, and he was like, all right, you need a cheap place to stay, I'll help you out. That's the impression I get.
Like artsy bohemians.
Yeah, or like, techie bohemians or something. I don't know. Yeah. But that's the milieu that he comes out of, I think, from what I've heard. And yes, I mean, the way, there is something quite intense and tragic about the way that he ended up dying. Again, we're skipping ahead here a little bit, but he survived this crazy thing that happened. I mean, a thing that almost nobody else would survive. Having a group of people, fighting with a group of people and being stabbed so many times in the head and throughout his body, walking around with a sword literally sticking from his back through his chest, and living through all of that, he must have thought like, okay, luck and God is on my side. And then in the end, that's not what ended up happening.
Yeah, one of the Zizians came back this year, I believe, took revenge.
That's right.
We don't want to skip too far ahead. Right now, we are in 2022. The Zizians just faked their deaths. They pop back up in Vallejo. Curtis Lind has been stabbed with a katana through the chest. 2 of the Zizians are being held where they're still awaiting murder charges, and I'm assuming it's probably going to go to trial. They didn't plead guilty, did they?
No, I think it's going to go to trial. In fact, it was going to go to trial just last month, and Curtis Lind was about to testify at that trial, which I think has something to do with the timing of his death.
Jeez. Yeah. All right, so the next thing that I read is that the Zizians were discovered living in Maryland, including Ziz herself.
Well, let's back up.
Okay.
Because a month after this stabbing incident in Vallejo, Ziz and a couple of her friends pop back up in suburban Philadelphia. This is at the end of 2022. New Year's Eve, 2022, right as 2023 is breaking, an elderly couple is found shot in the head and killed in their home in suburban Philly.
And that was in Delaware County, right? North suburbs, Chester Heights, from what if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And so this elderly couple is Richard and Rita Zajko, and it turns out that they are the parents of one of the Zizians, one of the people traveling around and sort of being underground at this point with Ziz, a young woman named Jamie Zajko. And Ziz and Jamie and another guy are found within days at a motel near this shooting incident after the bodies are discovered by neighbors.
Found by the cops.
Found by the cops.
Gotcha.
Who are at this point, they're like, oh, well, these people have a daughter. Where's the daughter? We don't know. They start tracking her, and they end up tracking her to this motel with Ziz and Ziz and one other person. And the 3 of them are arrested, taken into custody. There's some circumstantial evidence that maybe Jamie did buy a gun that was the same type that was used to kill her parents. But for whatever reason, we don't know why, all 3 of them are released. There's not enough evidence to press charges on any of them. And they run free, they walk free away from this on bail, so they're supposed to continue showing up for hearings to kind of like keep looking into this, and of course then just completely disappear again and go underground.
Yeah, because they have the California case they're attached to as well.
At this point, there's a string of, I believe, 3 different cases, criminal cases, that they have walked away from one after the other and completely disappeared.
I'm definitely getting some Manson family vibes at this stage.
I think I've heard the term Manson family thrown around when it comes to the Zizians. I don't think it's exactly appropriate, just because I do think that it is a bit more decentralized. It is a little bit, it's not like there's kind of like dear leader that we're going to follow type of situation. There isn't all that same insane sex stuff. And at the core of it, even though a lot of this violence is so horrible and so seemingly random, there is a kind of coherent real philosophy about trying to save the world from a coming technological threat.
Right.
So, unlike Charles Manson, who is just a raving lunatic, the Zizians actually have something interesting at the very core of what they're doing.
So what threat is being subverted by killing the parents of one of the fellow Zizians?
That I cannot tell you. I think that they went off base. I think that they lost track of reality and started reacting to things in their immediate vicinity. There's also apparently a part of Zizianism, or part of Ziz's writings on her blog, where she talks about the ethical need to take revenge. So if something has been done to you, you have to take revenge for it, ethically, for the good of humanity. And Jamie's parents, Richard and Rita Zajko, according to Jamie's blog, were abusive parents when she was growing up.
I mean, when you're dealing with these kinds of people, anarchists, when you say abusive, is that like telling the kid they're never going to be in the Olympics, or are we talking about like real punishment?
That I can't say.
You know what I mean? Because I've met some people in the more anarchist scenes, and then when they refer to their abusive childhood homes, I understand anything can be traumatic, but they're talking about like their parents not really giving them like the validation, which to me, coming from an Irish-Italian background, is unbelievable, because I'm the first person in my entire lineage to not get abused as a child, which is great.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I don't know if this is like a snowflake type situation or whether it's more serious. I mean, like you said, I mean, of course, people can exaggerate things or build trauma out of any tiny interaction, but also there are quite a lot of truly abusive households out there. So yeah, we don't know. That being said, none of this is an excuse to hunt down and kill your parents.
I don't know, man. If your parents were on some like, Catholic Church behavior, I think it's pretty acceptable.
We just have no idea, and hopefully we're going to find out more as this thing progresses, but we don't know why Richard and Rita were killed ultimately.
Okay, so they vanish again. This is kind of the big through line in the Zizian story is vanishing. They're pretty good at it.
Especially Ziz. She just keeps walking out. So she's in jail for at least a month in Pennsylvania before she posts bail and is able to walk away. The court apparently has guarantees from her family and friends and her lawyer that she's going to stick around and, of course, be responsible. And then, of course, gone without a trace. So that is 2023 at that point when she has disappeared. And things go dark. People within the rationalist community back in the Bay Area who consider themselves to be the enemies of Ziz at this point, or to be, they're scared. They don't know what's going to happen. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop. There's a lot of concern about whether there's a hit list or a kill list, because obviously this group of people is capable of murder or of killing people, at least, possibly, allegedly. Again, they've never even been charged with murder at this point, except for the ones who are in custody in Vallejo. But there's just a lot of speculation and sort of fear about what's going to happen next, and then nothing happens. 2023 rolls into 2024, silence. 2024 rolls into 2025, silence, and then boom, January 2025, they pop back up on a snowy highway in rural Vermont, and a Border Patrol agent has been killed. And this allegedly happened during a stop on this highway in Vermont. I guess the Border Patrol near the Canadian border are allowed to just stop any car they want to for an immigrant inspection.
They can do it, I think, within like 100 miles of any border here too. Like if you were to drive on some routes, for example, if you were to drive from Mexicali up like past the Salton Sea, like if you were to drive from El Centro in Brawley, which is like the Imperial Valley, to Palm Springs, there's like four stations that like scan your car for bodies. Because they're feds, they don't have to Mirandize you. It's really strange. Like any federal governing body isn't beholden to the same restrictions as police officers, so they don't need probable cause. They don't need it anywhere, nor does ICE. Any federal police agency can do whatever they want at any time.
That's wild. I grew up in Detroit, literally on the Canadian border with Windsor, Canada, and Windsor, Ontario. And I never, we used to roll around the city, going to shows and smoking weed before that was legal in Michigan. Yeah. And we were always scared of cops, but we'd never heard of anybody getting pulled over by Border Patrol.
Yeah. Is there a lot of cross traffic across that bridge?
Ton. It's the heaviest commercial traffic internationally in the entire country.
Damn, I did not know that.
On a road, I think that doesn't count the ports of Los Angeles or whatever. Yeah. I mean, until now, maybe I think things are icing up a little.
It's funny, when I was in Detroit, I was asking people like, y'all ever been to Canada? They were like, no way.
Really?
Well, a lot of like Detroit townies, they're just like, we don't give a shit about that.
I mean, Windsor is, you need a very specific reason if you're going to go to Windsor.
And I think also there's like a bunch of, the French Canadians are pretty heavy in the drug trade. And a lot of them bring, like, especially with the Hells Angels in Montreal, they control the trade of meth in the whole country. So I think there's like a lot of drugs that get transported from Montreal and Quebec down that highway, past where like Burlington and Montpelier is, that goes south, and then that feeds Boston, New York, etc. Because the thing about organized crime in Canada, which is so interesting, is that it hasn't been infiltrated by the FBI. And the FBI has infiltrated, especially in the 70s, almost all of these like subversive countercultural organizations. But it's not the case in Canada. Like bikers and outlaw biker culture in Canada is still scary. I always say in America, you're hard pressed to find a patched biker below 60 years old. You know, if you see most bikers, they're older from those times. Dude, I was in Canada. I was seeing Hell's Angels my age, who like you could tell like you don't want to fuck with those guys.
That's crazy.
And so I think that's probably why there's an enhanced border security on the Vermont border. That's just my theory. Also, New Hampshire has much stricter laws, and New Hampshire doesn't play around. New Hampshire's like the Arizona of New England. Like if you get caught with a half ounce of weed driving from upstate New York to Massachusetts, and you get pulled over in New Hampshire, you're more likely to face time. So that's just kind of setting the stage. And so they're close to the border. They're driving.
Yeah.
Is there anything weird about them in the car? Are they? I'm reading they were dressed in tactical gear.
Yeah, so these two in particular had been staying at a motel somewhere nearby, and the motel workers had noticed this couple people, Teresa Youngblood and Ophelia Baucult, who are two characters that I had never encountered before, and again, ostensibly drawn in online through Ziz's writings and kind of like newer Zizians. So it keeps attracting more people over these years. Ophelia Baucult is a German citizen who, by the way, before she was involved in this altercation in Vermont, was a quant trader in New York City. So like making six figures, working at this, like quant trading firm
What
in
is
New York.
quant? Is that cryptocurrency?
Quantitative. It's like using math. I don't know. It's like using algorithms and math to trade on the market, basically. So
That's awesome.
yeah, so left that life and was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to become a vegan anarchist outlaw in rural Vermont. So the staff at this motel see these people dressed up in tactical gear, carrying around guns, carrying around various odd things that kind of start to freak them out because they're staying there for more than a couple nights. And they call local law enforcement. So the local law enforcement starts trailing them and kind of like looking into who are these people staying at this motel. We're not sure whether they were pulled over by Border Patrol because they were being tracked or whether it was just some random immigrant inspection. Yeah. But they get pulled over. This Border Patrol agent named David Mayland pulls them over with his partner, and they're like, "Hey, can we let's get your IDs. Let's get your IDs. Let's look through them." They find Ophelia Baucult, this quant trader who is a German citizen with a work visa. They find her ID and they find her work visa to be expired. Right. They go back to the car. They're like, "Look, your work visa is expired. You both need to get out of this car so we can search the car." The two people get out of the car and immediately, one of them, we think it was Teresa, the other one, opens fire on the Border Patrol agents and kills David Mayland, the guy who initiated the stop. There's a ton of crossfire. Ophelia Baucult gets shot and killed, dies on the scene, and Teresa Youngblood is arrested. Right. So this blows up because you have a federal officer who's killed on the highway. A Border Patrol officer, I think, hasn't been killed in 15 years or something like that in this country. So it's big news. And then it's even bigger news when people are like, wait, these people are part of an AI cult. That kind of like trickles through online pretty quickly.
It's got all of the buzzwords required to run a pretty hefty news cycle.
Exactly, yeah. So it explodes. And then a week later, after that, Curtis Lind, the old landlord down in Vallejo who survived the samurai sword stabbing attack and is set to testify the following week in the criminal trial, is approached in public, allegedly, by a young man named Max Snyder, who is another sort of newer convert to Zizianism, has been in that community online for several years, but people didn't know that he had like gone off the reservation and was, trying to like actually be a part of this thing physically. Yeah. And he approaches Curtis Lind in broad daylight in front of the neighbors, in front of a bunch of people, witnesses who later described this horrific scene, and just starts stabbing him and stabs him a bunch of times. Curtis Lind is laying on the ground, bleeding to death. Max Snyder runs away. He then has an idea, comes back, slits his throat to make sure that the job is done, and then walks away and is pretty easily found by police later that day and arrested.
Yeah, I don't know about him, but those other two who killed the Border Patrol agent, they're never getting out of jail.
Well, one of them's dead. So,
but the other one, I'm just saying, that's like, man, there's no way you can fight that.
No. I mean, there's no way. And, there was some speculation early on that it might have been friendly fire that killed the Border Patrol agent, that it might have been one of the other agents who actually shot him. We don't know.
But there was a gunfight. It was mutual.
Yes. Okay. So, yes, this person is almost certainly gonna stay in prison for a very, very, very long time.
And that Border Patrol situation is what really like triple blew up the whole Ziz story.
The fact that a cop got killed, and then the fact that it had to do with AI, and then the fact that there was this revenge killing of somebody who had already been a part of a previous news cycle a few years ago, all of that was this perfect storm, and it's just been this media frenzy ever since then. So yeah, you've seen articles all over the place, from Wall Street Journal to Wired to, San Francisco Chronicle to NBC, Fox News. Everybody's covering this at this point.
Yeah, I saw like pretty quickly it got picked up by the reactionary right-wing internet ecosystem. You familiar with a guy named Andy No?
No.
Andy No is like the #1, back in like the Antifa days in 2020 when it was like Antifa, Proud Boys, constant street battles, he was like the #1 Proud Boys affiliated reactionary Twitter talking head.
Awesome.
And so like pretty much his feed is like, if there's a surveillance video of a person who's gay or black doing a crime anywhere in the world, he's like the first guy to post it. So he's like creating this world of like reactionary, like, deport immigrants. He's pretty much an Asian white supremacist, if you're familiar with that sort of archetype.
Sure.
So he has been reporting heavy, almost daily on the Ziz. He calls it Trantifa.
Oh, you know what? I have seen this shit. Yeah, absolutely.
And he's like, look at Antifa escalating their tactics after the Trump victory. So the point is, lots of different groups are taking this story and using it for their own purpose.
Everybody can read something onto this. Just like AI itself, this story is in some ways like a reflection of the society that's consuming it. So yeah, there's a billion different angles, there's a billion different entry points, a ton of ideas swimming around underneath it, and that's what attracted me to it as a filmmaker. And that's why I've been chasing this story for so long, is just how rich it is. Yeah. But yeah, of course, quite predictably, the right is latching onto the fact that there are a lot of trans people involved in this story, and using it to confirm a lot of their own worst fears about that.
Yeah, for sure. And then a lot of people, I'm sure, want to know, where is Ziz?
Well, for about a month, that is what a lot of people wanted to know. Ziz, again,
no way,
disappeared, walked away from this. And then about a month ago now, so late February of this year, Ziz and Daniel Blank and Jamie Zajko, whose parents were killed back in Pennsylvania, are found living in a box truck in deep rural Maryland. And they have some guns on them, and they're arrested and put in custody for trespassing and for possession of firearms, illegal possession of firearms, and I think resisting arrest or something like that. And so now they're all sitting in jail in Allegheny County, rural Maryland, awaiting trial for these misdemeanors. And the judge is like, I don't think we're going to let you out on bail this time. Even though these are misdemeanors, you'll have to sit here for a while.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't either.
Yeah, it seems like a flight risk at this point.
So throughout the process of actually filming your documentary, have you gotten to talk to any Zizians?
Yes. I'm not going to name names, but I have been able to have, a pretty extensive, good, long sit down with them.
How much do you want to say before the movie comes out about, some things you were able to learn from those interviews?
I think that the most important and compelling thing that I learned was really what they believe, which is, Ziz has this blog online called Sinceriously, and she's been publishing it since mid-20-teens, 2016, 2017, something like that. That is kind of like seen as like the Bible of this way of thinking. And it's very, very difficult to parse. I don't know if you've seen it or interacted with it at all. It's just incredibly obscure and opaque and filled with references to references, and like everything is oblique, and like everything is like a quote from a video game you've never heard of, or like some anime that existed for like 1 second in a comic book shop in 1997 or something like that.
Totally.
So it's all just like extremely layered. It almost seems like nonsense unless you're deeply steeped in this kind of like Tumblr talk that is very specific to the Zizians.
You know what's fascinating about that is Mac Dre also spoke in a very indistinguishable dialect called Thislamic.
Thislamic?
Thislamic, because he would do thiz. So it was ecstasy. It was an ecstasy language.
Whoa.
And it was almost like a hybrid between Arabic. So like he would say Yara mean is like, do you know what I mean?
Okay.
And he would say things like, he would call himself, I think it was the Reverend Al Bubu, and he would say the eagle has landed all the time. So there's certain stuff.
There's speakers here. Does
Really?
it say anything? Oh, no. Okay.
No, but he would have if this wasn't like a 15-year-old toy.
Okay, well, I might have.
And also, you know who also spoke a different language?
Huh.
The Zodiac Killer. You know what I mean?
I think you're coming up with a thesis, a kind of like Vallejo-centered occult
I'm like
thesis.
taking the completely wrong take from this interview. I'm just like, so dude, people in Vallejo are fucking crazy and they speak their own language.
Basically, people in Vallejo come up with their own languages. That's what I've discovered from this.
So, yo, are you gonna? One of the things I wanted to ask you too, backing up a little bit, is like, as a documentary filmmaker, you know, who knows what you're doing, when you're covering a sensitive subject where there's active cases involved, how do you personally go about building trust with sources who are obviously scared to say the wrong stuff?
I mean, I came up making films for the past decade or so, at least. I've been making stuff about like deep tech subcultures and ideology. So I made a film called The Seasteaders back in 2017. Have you heard of this crew? You'd be interested in them. There's like anarcho-capitalist techno-libertarians who want to build artificial floating islands in international waters and start their own countries to experiment with different forms of government, basically.
Have you heard of the micronation of Icelandia?
Yes.
Is it connected to that?
That's, I mean, not directly, but it's like sort of part of the same idea.
Because that's a crowd-funded island micronation founded by anarcho-capitalists.
Yeah.
But I'd more just call them like super adventure-pilled people.
Okay, yeah. Well, these people are much more, the ones that I was following are much more Silicon Valley based. They get their money from like Milton Friedman, the economist Milton Friedman's grandson, Patrick Friedman. It's kind of just like this incredibly like right libertarian, neo-reactionary style of going about trying to build a new society. And actually, a lot of these ideas are are sort of like infiltrating the American government right now. But that's a whole different story.
Anarcho-capitalism is bad news. That's all I'm saying. It's insane.
And they have a lot of purchase in the tech world. So yeah, I had spent time with them. We made a film for Dis.art about them that screened at a ton of festivals and kind of blew up online a little bit and played it all over the world. And that sort of set me down this path of just like, okay, this kind of like broader Silicon Valley ecosystem. There's all these different subcultures swimming around there, but they're all kind of like connected to each other through these ideological tendrils, and also connected to the stuff that we interact, like our phones and the shit that we interact with every day is kind of in some way infused with these ideologies. So I got obsessed with that, and that's just been my beat. So because I've been making those films for a while now, a little bit now, people within that world know me. I sort of know the language a little bit. I know the sort of like foundational texts of a lot of this stuff.
So through your work, you've been able to build credibility amongst like the deepest sunken depths of this iceberg, to where people are like, this guy's not a reactionary, he's not full of shit, he's not gonna do us dirty.
Yeah, to some extent I think that's right. But you know, I mean, you have to build credibility with each new person that you meet. I'm sure you've found this as well. It's not, you don't come into any existing relationship with built-in credibility.
Yeah.
But because I've been so deep in these sort of like interconnecting worlds for so long, it was somebody from the rationalist community themselves that reached out to me back in 2022 and was like, yo, you should look into what's going on here. There's some crazy shit going down in this community.
Well, shout out to them. That's like the ultimate tip.
Yeah, I know. It's really, it's borne a lot of fruit, that's for sure. But yeah, we're still in the middle of making this film, man. It's a long process. This stuff runs deep, and you know, as you shoot, you're sort of like getting funding and finding ways to keep it going and looking for partners in various places. You know the game. I mean, it's tough out there. But.
Yeah, I mean, it really just depends how soon you want to get it out. I think that for you, it'd be much more of a timeline concern. Like obviously, I'm not saying that people won't care about this situation in 2 years, but there could be a lot of developments that happen that you'd want to include, but you can't because the studio has picture locked it and they've scheduled it. Like when I did the project with HBO, we had finished the movie a year and a half before it came out. And so like I'm basically presenting old news to a new audience, but people actually in the scene were like, dude, this is like old ass shit. Yeah. So it's kind of like, but you also make more money if you do it through a partner, especially if it's a long form documentary.
Yeah.
So
these are things we're all weighing. I mean, I'm working with some big hitters right now. This Memory Studios is this incredible, you know, they made the film All Light Everywhere. I don't know if you saw it. It's about police surveillance, body cameras, this, so I'm working with them. They're incredible, and then we got a couple other production companies on board. But yeah, like whether to partner with a big streamer, whether to do it with Hollywood or not, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this ends up going.
Well, I think that the nature of the documentary, I haven't even seen it, but just with your extensive base of knowledge, they'll love it because they love crime. Netflix, the streamers right now, I feel like I was reading online that true crime has surpassed every single other documentary genre by like 2 or 3 times in the past 7 years.
It's crazy, and this did not start off as a true crime story. It just kind of happened recently with all the headlines that have been blowing up.
I mean, have you seen some of the shit on Netflix? I was scrolling through the other day, and on the top one, it said like, it must have been a movie made with AI. It said 10 scariest leaders. And it was just like episode 1, Genghis Khan, episode 2, Hitler, episode 3, Pol Pot. I'm like, this is like, it was literally like it was AI. It was like a David Attenborough voice clone with stock footage of like drone footage of Cambodia and like a zoom in pan shot of a sad picture from the 70s.
Yeah.
And I was like, who made this?
There are people who have just found their niche and they're like, I know how to put scary music over a slow zoom shot, and I know the right DP, and I know the right production company, and we can get money for it, and this is just like my assembly line kind of like factory job of making these sort of like scary, ominous true crime style stuff. I mean, there's a lot of good true crime out there, don't get me wrong.
Do you have any recommendations?
Well, I mean, the OG, Errol Morris, is one of my favorite filmmakers ever. You ever check out his stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of his son's stuff too, but not as much Errol.
Thin Blue Line is...
He made that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good documentary.
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, it basically kickstarted the entire true crime genre.
Yeah.
But I also really like Andrew Jarecki's work. You ever see The Jinx?
No, I gotta watch more documentaries.
This guy, this billionaire, Robert Durst, was like killing his wives in Manhattan and became friends with this documentary filmmaker who started trying to out him. It's crazy.
Is he the guy who confessed with a lav on when he was taking a piss?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that's one of my favorite. I've only seen that clip in particular when they were like trying to pin him for so long, and then he was taking a piss. And what did he say?
He's like, I killed them all.
He's like, this fucking asshole's never gonna figure this out. Oh shit, it's a live mic. I would have swallowed my lav. Assuming that it was recording it to itself.
Right. I think it might have been wirelessly transmitting.
Yeah, because I know the Jersey Shore dudes, they would do this thing when they were hanging out doing coke and stuff,
Oh, yeah?
Because, I don't know, the Situation was doing coke the whole Jersey Shore.
They'd thump their mic?
They would go like this, and then they would hold the mic, and they'd be like,
whoa.
You know what I mean? So real ones... I'm just saying, if I killed a bunch of people, I would figure out how to get around that.
Well, dude, you got to watch. I mean, that whole series is amazing. The Jinx. It's on HBO. Highly recommend.
I'll definitely check it out.
Best true crime of.
And then we can cut this, but this is a real documentary filmmaker question. Where do you find your music from?
I have a lot. I grew up with musician friends in Detroit, so I'm like, I came up with all these like crazy techno and noise and like experimental music people in the Metro Detroit area, and a lot of them just built up these incredible libraries and introduced me to other musicians. And I also ended up with one of my good friends who's from that scene making a doc series called Far Off Sounds, which is about like weird, crazy musical subcultures around the world, like musical experiences and subcultures. And so over the years, I've just met all these amazing musicians, and because I hate dealing with music libraries because their music sucks, and I hate dealing with licensing songs that I love from people I don't know because it's so expensive, I usually just pull from albums that have been released by people that I know.
And you know that they're going to be chill with it.
They're always chill. I'll always toss them a little bit of money, whatever kind of budget we have, we'll fit them in something, but
Yeah, we're kind of stuck in this like motion array art list loop where we just like end up using these same ambient songs all the time.
Yeah.
Because you throw ambient on anything and people are like, wow, this is art.
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
Okay, Detroit question. Best techno house bar?
I don't know. It's been a while. I've been in LA for over 11, 12 years now.
Oh shit, was Old Miami open when you were there?
I fucking love Old Miami.
Oh, okay,
I
that's
have a
my
lot
spot.
of friends who play music at Old Miami. I used to live right down the street from there.
Oh, you lived in Midtown?
For a while, yeah. I lived in Woodbridge. Yeah,
oh, dude,
close
some
to
good spots in Hamtramck too.
Hell yeah.
Dude, I love Detroit.
Detroit's the best. I didn't know that you'd been to Detroit.
I used to, I mean, it's my spot. I like other parts of Michigan too.
I guess you've made some stuff there. You've shot some stuff.
A little bit. It's actually not. I've shot like a couple interviews in Detroit, but like I always would go to the Upper Peninsula, just drive around in the summertime.
Wait, you said you used to live where?
I used to live in an RV.
In where? In Michigan? Though,
just around, like sometimes, but like typically in the summertime, I would do the Minneapolis up through Wisconsin down to Detroit. It's just the best, and it's like the only time to do it.
Hell yeah. I really want to buy property in the UP. I think it's the best climate hedge.
Yeah. And you get to kill wolves and get paid for it.
Yeah.
But if you did that, you probably wouldn't be able to interview Ziz.
That's right. I mean, it's important to live in Los Angeles for various professional and creative reasons, but I do think, the world's getting really hot. I don't like hot summers, so I'm ready to live near water and kind of be in a place that's a little bit more temperate.
Respect. Is the Ziz interview coming? That's going to be the hard one.
Ziz, if you're watching this, please talk to me.
I can vouch. It's a good idea.
I know you're in custody right now, and your lawyer's probably telling you not to talk to any media. In fact, I know that's the case.
Don't listen to your lawyer. Listen to reporters.
That's terrible legal advice, but really good sort of general life advice, I would say.
Hey, man, well, thanks so much for your time, bro. I appreciate you coming on, our first IRL guest.
Thanks for being
here.
here.
That's a wrap. Yeah, that was sick.
Channel 5 Live Worldwide, Hollywood and Vine.
Fuck the authority, Channel 5 News.
Channel 55. We don't fuck with custers. And 5 is the best number.
Hey, what's up, guys? Oh, shit. Hey, man, thanks for that web link. It's really working. I don't know if you guys missed the memo, but we just dropped an entire feature film. That's right, a full-blown movie at www.dearkellyfilm.com.
DearKellyFilm.com.
It's an action-packed movie that revolves around the life and times of Kelly Johnson, a.k.a. Kelly J. Patriot.
Kobe Bryant was assassinated by the Quins.
Come here, Nazi, you're going to Guantanamo.
Oh my gosh, what did I do? Am I getting canceled?
The Democrats don't like you, they're gonna cancel you.
It documents his semi-estranged family and their attempt to pull him out of the rabbit hole.
Are you selling baby parts, yes or no?
Don't tread on me. Don't even think about it.
I don't want to say too much, but it's a good movie. If you guys want to watch it, it would mean a lot. www.dearkellyfilm.com. It's available for rent and buy. You can rent it for $5.55, or you can buy it for $15.55.
www.dearkellyfilm.com. www.dearkellyfilm.com. www.dearkelly